going to know.
Okay, it's 4:30 and I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. A notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. I move from the chair that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016, as amended, the February 26, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at the Municipal Hall at 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seconded by Councillor Thomas, and all in favor? Seeing no objections, that's carried. For the adoption of the agenda, I move from the chair that the February 26, 2024 Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. Seconded by Councillor McMaster, all in favor? That is carried. Adoption of the minutes. I move from the chair that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting be held January 15th, 2024 be received. Seconded by Councillor McMaster, all in favor? Carried. Do we have any public comment on agenda items?
We don't have anyone currently signed up, Chair Sloan, but we have 2 attendees online via Zoom. So I'll do a call also for anyone attending here in the council chambers. If you'd like to make a comment to council, you can do so now. You need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. It's calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, no comments at this point, Chair Sloan.
Do we have any delegations?
No delegations.
Okay, so moving on to presentations and reports, we have the Water Master Plan.
Good evening, Council. This evening I'll be presenting the Water Master Plan as well as the Water Conservation Plan. The Water Master Plan obviously is a plan we've been waiting a long time for. I'm going to go through the presentation, the report in a fairly high level, and hoping to generate some discussion and conversation as we go through it. Yeah, look forward to come through with you. So what is it? The Water Master Plan was a fairly large project that had a number of items. Today, we're going to be speaking specifically about the 20-year capital plan, the limits to growth policy, potential policy, and 2024 and 2025 projects related to this. So the overall project was a capital plan, which is in front of council today, a DCC technical report, an emergency water plan, and a water conservation plan. Today is primarily about the 20-year capital plan. We will speak for my second presentation. We'll talk about the water conservation plan. Council can expect to see the development cost charge technical report likely in about 2-3 months from now, and the emergency plan probably sooner. And these are the outcomes of the speaker plan. The 20-year capital plan basically can be broken down into 4 areas: source water assessments, hydraulic assessment, treatment assessment, and condition assessment. We're going to start with source water, and we're going to get right into this plan. And for the audience, and council is familiar with it, but this plan is, I think, about 160 or 170 pages. It's a large report that requires some in-depth reading, and we're going to hit the very tops of the waves today. So in terms of source water, what I'm going to do with this table is we're going to start over at time horizon. We can see there's 3 scenarios. We have the current scenario in about 10 years from now, and in 2043, so 20 years from now. To the right of that column is ADD. ADD stands for average day demand, and that's basically what our demand is, the average daily demand we have over the recording period from 2014 to 2023. MDD to the right of that is maximum day demand. That is specifically the measurement of the day that we use the most water in any given year. Treatment capacity is the amount of water we can treat through our current treatment plant. So through Bay Street and Acknowledgement, we can treat about 4,200 cubic meters of water a day currently. Raw water capacity is actually on a low flow, how much water our streams produce on any given day. And again, these are all averages based on the best data that we have. The second column from the left is our treatment capacity surplus, and this speaks to the actual capacity we have in our current treatment plants. We won't reach capacity of treatment with our current treatment plants until after 2043, so that's some good news. And then finally, the final column, the raw water supply deficit, is probably what we'll spend a lot of our time talking about and what's going to drive a lot of our conversation today, the coming months, and the coming decades. So the way that we calculated, or the McElhaney, our consultants, calculated raw water supply is basically you take the MDD number, so that's 2873, and you minus your raw water capacity. So basically we're saying our maximum day demand is 2,800. Our raw water that's coming through our streams is 2,100, which gives us a deficit each day of 713 cubic meters. You can see that that number grows into the future as the community grows, and as we start to see the effects of climate change, which tells us that we're going to have less water in the long term during the summer months. We used MDD as a number for determining what our capacity of water is rather than ADD, because our system is a flow-through type of system. If we were a storage-based system, like many municipalities are, we'd be using the average day demand to determine, to do these calculations. And if you do that, quickly in your head, you can see that our average day demand is less than our low flows of 2160. So automatically you can see between these two areas, that the MDD and the ADD, that there's some room there, about 1,000 cubic meters or so. So I'm going to leave it there and look to council if you have any questions or comments before I get into the next slide.
And I just quickly will comment, even looking at the ADD, sorry, through the chair, even looking at the ADD, and we can go down, look at, we're still looking at a net deficit. Even if we were to use, if down through those timelines, we're still looking at a deficit, even if we are using those numbers. So it loudly and clearly speaks to us in terms of our water deficit.
Exactly. Yeah. If you look at the current year, there's about 300 cubic meters of give, I would say, but you're hoping that you have a summer that has rain in it. You're hoping that you don't have a drought. We did make it through last year. Again, this is not saying the sky is falling. It's just telling us what we've all suspected for a very long time, that we have a raw water source problem, and this for the first time has put it into a table for us and made it very clear. And so we're going to need to make some decisions, so that we can make decisions for us on water system and about our growth for our community in the years to come.
When you're predicting future demand, are you using the population growth that's quoted in the OCP?
Exactly.
What about growth of First Nations?
So in terms of the growth of First Nations, we don't currently supply water to any of the nations. There is development, at Tinwis, for example. We haven't looked into, we've got overall growth of the OCP, which encompasses that, so that would be captured within.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, the area around Tinwis.
From what I understand, the next big development of First Nation will be at Tla-o-qui-aht, and I believe that work is starting to get underway. And so likely that community, well, not likely, that community will be relying on the source water from Lost Chute Creek. This is just another way to look at maximum day demand. We can see in the aquamarine bars there, the one day that we measure each year that is our maximum day. We can see in yellow what our raw water capacity is, and you can see as we talked about it starts to decline over the coming years due to the climate change issues. We can see what our average MDD is in red, and then its projected increase as the community grows. And then just finally at the long top, we can see what our treatment capacity is for our 2 treatment plants. So what do we do about this? Well, we do it. There's a number of things we can do, and some recommendations from staff today. So the first thing that we would like to undertake, and this is part of the recommendations, is to move forward in 2024 with an alternative water source feasibility study. The plan in front of council today outlines what those may be. There's 7 or 8 different potential sources, anywhere from another lake, digging out a reservoir, treating our wastewater, desalination. There's a number of items that we need to dig into. And what this plan would do would be to spend time digging into each of those options, including receiving a Class C estimate about that, and and then including the feasibility of each of those. Who would you have to talk to? What are the distances? And what we'd like to do is get that project completed by the end of this year, and then brought back to the councils to start having a discussion about if we're going to continue to grow as a community, here are options, which one would we like to pursue? This is a very important study, not just for the ability to get more raw water, but it's also going to influence what projects we decide to do over the next 10 years. We're likely, if we bring in another water source, going to need another treatment plant. We're not bringing a water source into one of our existing treatment plants. And so the idea of how much funds you expend on infrastructure that we might not need in 20 years is actually a big deal. And so this is a really important study to help us frame what we're going to do in terms of water infrastructure projects over the next 20 years. In the meantime, we have a conservation plan that I'll be presenting on after this. The conservation plan includes recommendations that we would like to see moved into our conservation bylaw, and I will speak about that at length the next presentation. We would like to get moving on our remote water monitoring and telemetry upgrades. This process would allow us to have probably hourly data on our streams on Mears Island. So we have the 5 streams that provide the water. We would like to be able to monitor those in real time to allow us to operationally make adjustments where we need to ensure that we can maintain our water system through the summer times. The issues with that currently is there's obviously no power over on Mears Island. It's a forest, and so we have issues in terms of power and communications. And finally, we want to start today the conversation on a limits to growth policy and an understanding of what a policy really based on this water plan might look like. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But again, some of the items that were discussed is ADD versus MDD, what type of development is being proposed, all those types of things is likely going to find itself into a policy. So that was the exciting part of the presentation. I'm going to move through the other ones fairly quickly. We again had a hydraulic assessment of our infrastructure. This is our distribution system, so the pipes in the ground. We have the 2 systems. We have a low pressure system that is fed by osmosis, and we have a high pressure system fed by Bay Street. We've identified upgrades in there, items such as replacing AC main, which we already knew we had to do. We had reports on it, but now we've taken that and prioritized those projects. We'll prioritize those projects. We got some more good news in the fact that we overbuilt our potable water supply on this side of the peninsula. So the 4 reservoirs that we have. But what it does do, even though it's overbuilt and it's expensive storage, is it helps us balance out some of those short-term risks that we have because of our flow-through system. So it allows us to balance the system on a 3-4 week long basis. So that's how we've made it as far as we have, so we can balance with the water we store over here. The treatment assessment looked at our 2 treatment areas. We have obviously the Acknowledgement treatment plant, which is our newer plant. but produces only about a third of our water. That plant is likely needs significant upgrades at some time in the near future. Our Bay Street pump house, which has a number of issues as well. One of them being we don't actually meet the objectives of island health. We don't have the second form of treatment. The building is also below future sea level rise. It's a building built probably in the 60s or 70s at end of life. And so that's something we're going to want to look at, but we're going to need to know what we think we're going to want to do with source water before we make those final decisions. Those are significant projects. Again, the capacity for our treatment, in pure numbers is okay through 2043, but there is some capital projects that we'd like to undertake. And again, as I indicated earlier, the new raw water source will require new treatment. The condition assessment, this was a process where we went out and looked at all of our infrastructure to understand what its condition is, what its length of life is going to be, the costs, what it's currently worth, what it's going to cost to replace in the future. It was vetted by staff. This was a place where our staff and McElhaney went back and forth quite a bit to make sure that the information we have is accurate. And as we went through that process, this was integrated into our asset management program, and we're already using this information to make decisions on future projects. So the 2024 projects, what we'd like to get started on would be the remote water monitoring and telemetry upgrades, the 4th Street and Gibson Street water mains. Those are both AC water mains that have been identified in earlier studies and the study for replacement. Where this helps us is in terms of areas like non-revenue water, so leaks and improves, and so to ensure that we're keeping as much water as we're treating. And finally, again, the alternative water source feasibility study, I think, is the key study for us for 2024. We haven't, other than these 4 projects, we haven't proposed anything else from the plan for 2024, just because we received the final version of this a week ago. We're deep into our budget for 24 to 28. And so we think we'll see a bunch of these. You'll see in 25, council will see a number of new projects come on board, but based on the actual water master plan priorities. And so we expect to see that every year. It's going to be a 20-year plan, or financial plans are 5 years. So council will have lots of forewarning of projects as they come up. In terms of engagement, there's the annual budget process where we approve these projects. Today's meeting, which is obviously being recorded, it's expected that we'll make sure this comes up and talk to Tofino, and then likely, and this, we haven't had this discussion yet internally, but I feel like for a plan of this magnitude and with recommendations that will affect us all for decades to come, it may be a worthy plan to introduce at a town hall meeting for the community to review and digest. So the next steps, the first one is to scope out a limits to growth policy for council's consideration. And why that says scope out versus create is that I'm not sure exactly what this policy is going to look like, and I really want to be clear with council and the community what the the ceiling is, what the floor, what the walls look like of this policy. So what's in scope, what's out of scope? Are we going to consider some single family lots that are empty? Are we going to consider affordable housing? Are we not going to consider something else? What limits, like what is our risk tolerance for continue to develop in some way or not? And so I want to make sure we have that we scope that out prior to actually getting into the work of developing this policy. And this policy is very important because in the time between the introduction of that policy and today, staff will be or already are fielding questions and making decisions based on this water system. And so the sooner we can get this limited growth policy in front of council, the better. It is something that's going to take a little bit of time. It's something we're going to have to do a lot of deep thinking about. There's going to be community consultations. We're going to be talking to our solicitors, looking into what other communities are doing. But it's a very important policy because staff are going to need that direction, this year, but also in years to come. Following, or as at the same time, we'll be back in front of council presenting the water emergency plan. The water conservation plan gets presented this evening. And then the water DCC bylaw amendments. Again, as I indicated earlier, we're going to integrate the WMP priority projects in next year's budget. And then as we go through this process of introducing this new capital plan, we're going to look at our C&I levy allocations and come back to council with some ideas about how that may need to be adjusted or how maybe it doesn't need to be adjusted. And this is something we're going to see probably before we do water. We'll be seeing fleet and possibly equipment. So we'll have some idea of what that process looks like prior to bringing a fairly big conversation back to council about the C&I levy. So I won't read those recommendations, but they're the same recommendations that are in your package. And if they're not, the ones in your package are correct. And then any questions or comments from council?
Mayor Law.
I got a question. Great report, by the way. Just loved reading it. A little scary, but it is. Just a question on the modeled demands. It was scenarios A, B, C, which were low, medium, and high growth, and then D, which was the low growth, coupled with 1% annual increase. And I noticed in the report it says scenario D results in the largest increase in demand and was used. And I understand why. I understand why it was used, but wouldn't a low and medium growth with a 1% infill be larger? Just a question about this.
I'd have to check in with her.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for you today.
Okay, and that's fine. I've just been reading that, but just a comment here as well. Maybe a question is the scenario that is used in the water master plan is foresees 65 additional units for 2033. But this is 2023 numbers, so I mean this is before Headwaters is actually turned on, which is 70 plus units. So just a note that we're already when we turn on Headwaters exceeding the 2033 additional units, and so
yeah, there's always that lag.
Yeah. Just something that I noted, and I'm sure council noted, but it should be noted. That's all I have to say.
Councilman Nestor.
Yeah, I'd echo this. A great report. It summarises what this whole town has talked about. Probably no backup for all the time I've been here. So it's great to have everything down on paper and with some backup. Related to Dan's question, you've done a statistical analysis, some kind. I mean, what are the margins of error? Like 2043 is not far away. And is it plus or minus 5 years, 10 years? I mean, I would imagine that margin of error will get better as we get more data. But it would be, I think it's good for the public to know that as time goes on.
So basically you're asking in terms of those three scenarios, the 2043 scenario, how the estimates are providing, which is based on the current growth.
Yeah.
What are your plus or minuses? I'll have to ask that question.
Okay. That's all I've got. Otherwise, it was great. Read it twice, and I need to read it again.
It's something I should mention. I neglected to at the beginning of the meeting was that last time we were in front of council, we talked about having it peer reviewed. That we'd actually did that, and we received it on Friday. And so the Coles noticed that the company that peer reviewed this project agrees with what McElhaney has found. Their one takeaway they took on a quick read of it on Friday was that the MDD number is very conservative, and that they had recommended something a little bit less conservative. And it's just that whole question about, this is the question we're going to have to ask ourselves, is what are we comfortable with between MDD and ADD, and what risk are we willing to take, knowing that the MDD were already in deficit. So there's, but we'll be presenting that to council at some point, at least distributing it to council and possibly in the talk if you know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I do, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, thank you once again. I'll echo. This is something we've been waiting for a very long time, and the information Of course, we'll have to read a third time, but some of the outstanding things that, the first recommendation, page 1, referring to an additional source to supplement the existing sources during times of extreme drought plan. So right off the top, that they're indicating that a new source will have to be identified if we want to continue to do as we are doing and potentially aim for growth. And so then within there is identified the feasibility study for the 8 options that were listed for source. And obviously that's going to be a critical piece of information, because when looking at the 20-year capital plan, we start looking at levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and level 1 from 2024 to 2029 indicates a certain capital costs that are associated with that. That will drastically change if with the implications of that feasibility study, and we will, I assume, make a choice on there. How will that be integrated then into that capital planning process? I know we need to wait for the information before you can make that adjustment, but it will significantly change the capital costs from $53 million over that lifespan to a significantly different amount.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've received the report and we have our report now. And so as we move forward and things change, and they will change every year, with our asset management and our infrastructure team, we'll be able to take that project and put it back in here and either do an addendum to the report, or we'll review that data. So that won't be an issue for us, other than whatever the price tag it's going to be. But speaking about that as well, as if we don't do this, if we have to do this work as well, because right now, obviously, we have a generational housing crisis. We have the whole province has been asked to build housing. We have a serious infrastructure issue, like many communities do. But if the province and the federal government want us to continue to build housing, we'll need the information to tell them why we can't and how much money we want from them to support us in these efforts. So like these numbers are going to be large, but the intent again is to have enough information data to present in a grant application or something like that to say to the higher levels of government, sure, but so.
Yeah, we still have issues around the infrastructure we have in place, and you've laid out very clear, or the report lays out very clearly those timeframes for service life, and those are, there's price tags attached with that. So on top of all the other issues we have, what we have already that we have to deal with. I did have, through the chair, if I may, just quickly on those alternative water sources that were identified in terms of feedback for the feasibility study. There are some in here, it's going to cost, I think, the price tag we're looking at approximately $100,000, just to lessen their workload. If there can be some input into some of these recommended of those 8, there's some that I can definitely say we can scratch off right from the surface, such as a desalination plant as an example. So that for sure, we know that that's not something where, well, I can't speak for all of council, but certainly we can strike some of those ones that would require a significant amount of work to be done. So that was just a quick comment in terms of those 8 sources or 7 sources that were identified.
Yeah, I think we would love to hear that from council today about that. We have had those discussions already with Matt Clay that it's probably not 8, it's probably more like 5 that we're going to have to look into, but any direction from council, would be helpful for us to have that conversation.
Great. And just one last one. It's a funny one because as I read through the report, there was a technical memo, Tofino water supply site visit, and they referred to Lonzo Creek and East Lonzo Creek. And, I have explored this sound in depth and detail and done a lot of mapping of this sound. And I've never heard of Lonzo Creek or East Lonzo Creek for that matter. I don't know if you have any insight there, Mr. Rogers. If you can, please share it with me.
I don't know anything about Lonzo Creek. I did in my notes to make sure it's not a typo.
Yeah.
But I'm using a chart that no one else uses.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I think this report demonstrates the need for our asset management plan that the district has put a lot of work, expenditure and time into, and I think this is really good. It demonstrates to the public why we need an asset management plan.
I think it's a great comment.
Through the chair, just a quick question about council weighing in on potential new water sources. Did you want council to comment on that? at this meeting today or?
Yeah, I wouldn't take any comments at this point. Like, we're gonna, at some point, we're gonna go to a town hall, probably a town hall meeting. I think I can feel that where we want to go with this. And you know, that might be one of the items that we can ask the community as well, because there's a lot of people who lived up here for a long time who have ideas about this. Ours was kind of, you know, crowdsourced from ourselves within our group, but I think reaching out to everybody, including yourselves, would help us sort of fine tune that. So you can tell me today, or we can wait till town hall.
Well, I was just wondering if it was set up, the meeting was set through the chair, meeting was set up today, that we would be walked through that, or we could do it another time.
Yeah, so we haven't set it up that way because this is kind of this, wanted to get this in front of council, just brief overview. There's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of conversations we're gonna have to have. But hearing what the ones that council are interested in now will help us determine what their next steps are gonna be.
Thank you.
No desalination, one vote for no desalination.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, as we do look at the you know, the new sources, what we've heard from the federal government in the past and provincial governments is that Kennedy Lake was sort of a preferred option because it would be a partnership between probably all the communities on the peninsula, both ends. So I'm just wondering, as we look at new water sources, that question sort of maybe should be asked up front, because if they're not going to support some of the other sources that would only serve Tofino, then I think those can be eliminated from the list as well. So that's not saying I'm favoring Kennedy Lake or anything, but I'm thinking that federal and provincial funding would want to cover as much ground as they could with the kind of money it takes to get this. So that's one of the questions that could probably guide how many sources we look at and what kinds of sources. Also, I'm wondering if there's any kind of consideration in those water sources of major storage of any kind, building reservoirs or so on, because we seem to get a lot of water at one time of the year, but not when we need it. So there, or could be a combination of more source and reservoir kind of storage. So yeah, some of my thoughts as we go through that.
Maybe just another quick comment. This is more from you know, and it might be something that I do offline, but there's a whole number, you know, like 12 pages here. There's a lot of geek out stuff that within the report, and I'm looking over at Simon. I know we have these conversations. I don't know if this is the right time for those kinds of conversations, because it doesn't apply to sort of the 20-year capital plan and all that. But I'm just looking over to Simon there, and you know, maybe there'd be an opportunity at some point to let's call it a geek out session where we can go over some of the more technical aspects in terms of, like, for example, creek source water supply, where you know, there's a lot of variabilities in there, you know, intrinsic inaccuracies in those measurements that we have over time in place, and those are the types of questions that I don't want to bore everybody here with, but would there be an opportunity at another time for a more in-depth technical kind of conversation that may not necessarily be necessary for a council meeting per se? Is there an opportunity? I know they're potentially one-on-one, but
yeah, I think it's a great question. I probably will look to the CEO to answer this completely, but I mean, it may be that what we get is a list of questions. And then we can go through and work with our engineering consultants and our team to do that, so that when we get the answer, I can present them to everyone. And again, you know, obviously meeting with the staff is fine too. I could kind of leave that to CEO and council decide what works best for you, but our team is open to any discussions. Consultants cost us money, so does team, but less money than consultants.
Thank you.
Through the chair, just a comment on the possible options, and this just because Councillor Steer brought it up, but you know, I could see possibly if just a hypothetical, Kennedy Lake is the preferred option for a major water source, and that becomes a 10-year, $100 million project. Was throwing it out there, you know, knowing how long it takes just to get a permit through the park. That maybe a local desalination could be an option, noting that we only need the water for 4 months in the summer, and that's where the deficit is. And it may be a combination that something like a small desalination could get us through until we get the major water source. So that just throwing it out there, not to dismiss desalination. It's used all over the world, certainly down the coast of California lots, but just something to think about. And also, just a comment, the last comment for me on limits to growth. Maybe, well, actually, we're going to talk about that later, right?
I think we're at the end of this, and we're going to go to conversation, but I think we should talk about them.
Limits to growth is that really, just to reiterate that this is a summertime deficit, not a year-round deficit. And there's always the possibility, and I'm just thinking divergent, of branching out our economy to be, for instance, we've talked about it before, education. The bulk of the economy is in the non-summer months, and it's possible we build something and shut it down in the summer. Just throwing out there's something about so that's all I have to say. I will stop time. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? Councillor Steer?
Well, yeah, if we're going to follow up with limits to growth, the conversations, I think you've framed it in the way that we need to have the 30,000 foot conversation in terms of where we put the guardrails on, where we box it in, and what are going to be the parameters around that conversation. Otherwise, it can go all over the map. So, it might be a more concentrated session where we have time to, get a bit of background information and then have a more specific meeting around that, because it's going to be a complex issue that we will need a bit of guidance in terms of staff capabilities, what the central issues may be. And so in terms of that framework, it might be tough right in this particular, I'm just thinking out loud, in terms of how I'd like to frame that conversation. So I'll leave it there.
I think I'll just add to that through the chair. I'm hesitant to try to guide on striking out any of our options in front of us now. I mean, we did just get this on Wednesday. It's a lot of information to take in. But I know it's obviously of utmost importance. We want to bump it to the top of that conversation, but not feeling comfortable being like, oh, definitely don't look at this.
That's a great comment. I mean, I think the one thing that comforts me after reading this, so having it for a while now in the draft for a while, is knowing that this is a really big issue that's faced our community for decades. It's okay for us to take a couple of months, a little bit longer, to figure this out and get it right once. And so making sure that our process that we use to develop this process encompasses all the things that council has indicated today, because it's a big decision. And so to feel comfortable that we made it through last summer on a drought, we're better at it than we were last year. We're going to have a conservation plan, which will present on next different stages potentially. We're operationally, we know more about what we're doing. We have a community that's receptive to what we're saying. Like, we'll show that again in the next plan. So as much as it's important, and it feels like it's right here now, we have to do something, we do have time, and we should take the time to make sure that that we do it right. The water won't ever just turn off. Like it won't. It'll keep going, and we'll have processes in place to make sure that happens. And so just want to be clear, for staff, our issue right now is that we have some development applications that are asking questions and that we have to be able to answer. But I feel comfortable based on this report, based on the peer review study, and based on what council has said today, we are comfortable making those decisions in the meantime. But moving forward, I think it'd be great for us as a council community to be very transparent about where we are and about what we're expecting and what we can do and what we can't.
Okay. I think one more.
Oh, yeah, I'd have to agree that I don't think we can really pin down the limits to growth at this stage because there's short-term and there's long-term visions and how whatever we decide to move forward on water source and get some of those costs. The whole DCC thing starts playing into it, and if you know, what kind of growth is going to support the kind of infrastructure that we're looking at. So lots of scenarios come to mind, but the short term, there's a couple of things. There's the kind of conservation and demand side management that will have to be in place to get us through to a point where we can better meet our water needs. There's development that's in stream. That's another question, and I think that kind of question is more immediate to look at, like upfront, than just sort of decide what growth's going to be forever. So I think there's kind of staged decisions on growth or limits to growth. So that we'll have to work through over time, and that will change as we look at sources and ways of better meeting those needs.
Yeah, I think one thing we can take comfort in is that the 2021 OCP, which we currently operate in, foreshadowed this. Like we set up the OCP to allow us to have this conversation, to think about growth in this way. So again, we're already supported by some of our bigger policy, and now it's just sort of fine tuning that and then bring that back into the OCP on the next review.
One more comment, well, probably one more. I did have a question here that I read my own writing. Within the source water conversation, and you know, I listed them off in some of the issues that were related to them. And one of them, in terms of those larger raw water supplies like Kennedy Lake or Balson, as an example, and I believe in even Lost Shoe Creek aquifer, a new treatment plant would be required. You'll have to excuse my ignorance, and why would a completely new plant be necessary to treat that form of raw water input?
So like it's fairly simple in the end. Like it depends on where it's coming from. So right now we have a treatment plant that has, you know, so Bay Street's treatment plant, for example, is where a submarine pipeline comes into it, and it has a certain number of pumps, a certain treatment set up for that. If you were to say, I wanted to use the same thing and bring another pipe, you'd have to bring that pipe to there. Is that the best location? Who knows? Like, does it make more sense to have something out of town? You'd have to upgrade the building anyways for the new treatment. So it's likely the age of our treatment plants that you can't reuse the treatment plant for the same thing. It really does. If it was Bolson Creek, maybe we're feeding Bolson Creek into, which is also a pretty crazy, like it's a.
Oh, I've been there.
I know, but it's now, there's water there, but we would need another submarine pipe. Do you dump that water into Mears, or do you continue the pipeline over to Bay Street? If it goes to Bay Street, you're gonna have to increase the size of Bay Street. So like these decisions about, these aren't just like plug and play type of treatment plants. They're built for a purpose. And so and Acknowledgement itself, again, is that location the best? I don't know. It can't treat anymore now. We don't have any room to add any more treatment in Acknowledgement. So even Acknowledgement, if we want to that, would be rebuilding that building anyways. And so you basically have a treatment plan. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I assume that it was part of the answer. I just wanted to make sure. And then just somewhat related to that, those different jurisdictional boundaries, and I counted 5 that we'd be having to deal with. And as Mayor Law pointed out, we know how long it takes to get one conversation going, and then add even something like Balson, which would potentially be a submarine. You're dealing with DFO, who I know intimately, and I can tell you will be here well into the next decade. So those are some of the considerations that jump out to me very quickly, or those regional collaborations that will be necessary for those 2 big projects proposed anyways.
Yeah, the feasibility study is not just going to tell us where and how much and how. It's going to say what are the other things we're going to have to deal with in jurisdiction. To your point, jurisdiction issues is going to be one of the big ones. maybe we, trying to get all those approvals, trying to get the $100 million, trying to get up 6 communities on board, all those things is beyond me. It's probably a provincial level project at that point. But those will be some of the items that we use to make our decision as a community, as a council, as you as a council, make your decisions about which one we're going to pursue. It feels like we can do it because it's affordable, plus it's the jurisdictional issue is not as great, that this isn't that back and forth, but until we kind of line them all up apples to apples, it's hard to have that conversation.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation. I move that the District of Tofino Water Master Plan attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Water Master Plan dated February 26, 2024 be received for information. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? And I move that staff develop a scope of limits to growth policy for council's consideration to address the raw water supply deficit identified in the 2024 Tofino Water Master Plan. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? And I move that the following projects receive early budget approval for 2024. The remote water monitoring and telemetry upgrades valued at $120,000 to be funded by the C&I levy. Water and alternative water source feasibility study valued at $105,250 to be funded by the C&I levy. Water. Seconded by Councillor McMaster. All in favor? Motion's carried. And then for the water conservation plan.
Thanks, man. For the second presentation, we'll be reviewing the water conservation plan, which I should mention at the very beginning is still in draft form, although it's getting towards final draft. But we're still going back and we are still going back and forth with McElhaney on some last minute edits. The project came out of the water master plan, as we learned in the last presentation. Our intent is to take the recommendations within this plan and get them translated into bylaw so that we can make use of them for the 2024 summer season. It's going to involve a conversation around our water stages and an overall water conservation plan. Council has seen a bit of that plan through the budget process and the water audits, the water conservation program project sheet that included water audits and storage next year. So the water conservation plan is mostly, for the large part, is collected wisdom. It's based on the water master plan data, which is great that we have this information now and we can use it to ground truth what we've been doing already. But a big part of this plan is making sure that all the actions that staff have been taking, community has been taking, and council has been directing over the last 5 to 10 years, put into a plan so that we can update that plan, we can move that plan forward. Because as it occurs right now, it's just an operational decision. It's generally, apart from the stages in the bylaw, we just make operational decisions based on what happened in the past. And a big part of this was just to bring that all together in one place. We vetted it through our staff, so we've gone back and forth with our consultants to make sure that it makes sense for us as well as community. And again, this is just it will be a resource for future years. So this is probably my favorite chart of the year, maybe the last 10 years. And I'm sorry to the folks in the audience, but I'll try to describe it for you. The squiggly line is our water use for the summer of 2023. You can see where it goes up, it means we're using lots of water, and when it goes down, we're not using so much water. The ups and downs that we see mostly through the whole graphic are the week. We're looking at weekends for the most part. You can see from here that our community is very receptive to conservation and to the messaging that we're providing. Stage 2 is the first purple line that was announced. You can sort of see it lags a little bit too by 2 or 3 days because this is based on water transfers. But you can see just after that purple line, it does drop down and sort of go back and forth a little bit until we hit the highway foreclosure, which was not a great event for our community, obviously, but you can see what happens there dramatically between that light green line and the next dark green line is basically the highway being closed. Once the highway reopens, it's a dark green, we move back to the submarine pipeline break, which required us to ask the community to restrict water for a day or two. You can see a drop there, and then you can see a sort of start to climb back up as we're, welcoming everybody back into the community after the closure. Great, we're using water. It's summertime, we're in a drought. Let's announce stage 3. So that gray line there, we can see that our use starts to drop as well. And then we were starting to get concerned about our storage, and we issued an urgent message. We can see it drop further. We had our town hall meeting where we said the same things again and dropped even further. And then for the most part, for the remainder of the year, except for the Cermak shutdown, you can see that that's the green line is Cermak shutdown. We kind of continue that trend for the rest of the year until we were out of the woods. So I just love this slide because it tells us that what we're doing is working, that the community understands our system and is receptive to the bigger picture. Again, we've said this in previous meetings and over the years, but our residents are very good at conserving. The yellow line is the British Columbia average, the blue dotted line is the Vancouver average, and then the green bars are our residential average. So I also want to say thank you to the residents for your conservation efforts. Because of this, the primary focus of the plan this year, and for this version of the plan, is going to be focusing on the commercial, industrial, and other sectors for the bulk of our reductions. So in terms of conservation focus for that sector, we're hoping to continue our water audit program, which has shown success over the years. We've done it sort of as pilot projects every couple of years. What I'd like to do is basically do that every year and to try to drive down water use as best as we can in the commercial sector. And this would be supporting the commercial sector with a company that comes in and does a water audit and in the end helps the commercial business reduce their water usage, reduces their amount of money they're having to pay in fees, and at the same time also conserves water for us. We can look at rates through the next couple months as we work on our utility bylaw rates. Operational improvements, so what we're actually doing as utility staff to manage our water system. We learned a lot last year and initiated a couple of new fixes that we think we can use again this year. And then finally, some infrastructure upgrades related to non-revenue water and leaks. So again, the water audit is an ongoing program. We've worked with the commercial sector. We've had great feedback by it. We're excited to move forward with that. We're hoping to work with local businesses, Tourism Tofino, the Chamber, and in terms of how we determine the best way to fund these water audits. In terms of operations, so this is the district area. This is what our utility staff does. We want to optimize our District of Tofino operations. And what that probably means is that we're probably going to focus a little bit more on Bay Street and a little bit earlier. So Bay Street is where we've seen the videos often of us spilling over the dam. What we want to do, I think what we want to do, and this is still an open discussion with myself and Simon and the team, is draw more heavily from that system and transfer water to the south and leave Acknowledgement as full as we can for as long as we can, because most of our water, 2/3 of our water comes through the Bay Street side of the system. So we like to capture as much of that as we can. We think the bypass that was installed last year will help with that. That will be reinstalled, or a new version of that will be reinstalled in this spring. And then finally, in terms of operations, we're about 19% of our water that we actually make goes missing, either through fire department using it or a leak or not being metered properly. And so that's a high number for our community. It's not crazy high, but it's higher than the average. And so I think that'll be another area that we would like to focus on. We're already doing that in terms of leak detection repair. We're upgrading, installing meters on District of Tofino facilities, so at least we can count the water that's going missing, and really try to get a handle on it, because there's a lot of At 19%, that's a fifth of the water that we're spending a fortune to treat is going missing. Again, it happens in all water systems. There's always going to be leaks, but we can get better. So that's definitely gonna be a focus for staff. So in terms of what our conservation targets are, we're going to look primarily at the major users and the commercial industrial institutional users, and try to encourage a 10% reduction during the summer periods, which translates to a total reduction between those two areas of about 6.5%. And then if we can target 25% reduction non-revenue water, that saves us about 1 to 2%. And so we have an overall target for the community for 2024 of an 8% reduction. And again, this is to mitigate the issues that we're facing in terms of our deficit in the raw water supply. And this is what we're going to have to do for years to come. Again, we're good at it, but we can't ever let up until we identify a future source. And it's just good business to spend less money. So I'm going to go through the stages, and I just want to preface this section by saying that none of this is decided yet. This was intended to introduce to council and the community. We expect that we'll be having a roundtable about this with community users or stakeholders in the commercial sector over the next couple of weeks. But we want to get it in place and make sure the bylaw changes are done before mid-April, early May type of time frame. So I'm not going to read these, but these are our current water stages, and there's some exemptions as well for new plantings. So what staff are proposing at this point, and again, this is not detailed, this is just the ideas at the stage, is a 3-stage process rather than a 4-stage process. We're suggesting that in stage 1, which currently just happens on May 1st, in stage 1 in the future is initiated by staff. So staff watching their eyes on the system, eyes on the forecasts. We initiate stage 1, and stage 1 is just communication and education. So that's when we really start rolling out our summer water communications. We don't have any prohibitions there. It's just basically saying, hey, we're May 1st or something. It's looking like it's going to be dry for the next 2 weeks. Please start thinking about what you're going to do for the summer to conserve water. The authority to end the stage restrictions would either lie with the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works or the CEO, and again, no automatic date on stage 1. Stage 2 is initiated by staff, and we have about a 48 hours notice of that. That will allow people to either fill up a hot tub, because that's a large complaint we have throughout the community, or a storage vessel. So you could use city water in that 48 hours to fill up storage in your yard for this stage. There'll be permissions during there. So we've heard that people are very interested in continuing to water their food gardens, washing wetsuits, foot washers, or rinsing of boat motors. Prohibitions supposed to be limited days for outside watering, no filling of hot tubs, no outdoor showers, and no power washing. Stage 3 is initiated immediately after following posting of notice. This looks a little bit like stage 4 does now. We're prohibiting everything except for food garden watering, washing wetsuits by hand, and foot washing. The reason those remain in is that what we understand in our conversations with the community through the last stakeholder process was that they were doing more laundry and undertaking more cleaning, using more water than if they could do things like washing their wetsuit by hand or washing their feet. Indoor use of water is for drinking and sanitation, and so that was the idea for stage 3. And then after stage 3, this was a big conversation last year. We activate our EOC, we consult our water emergency plan, which is in final draft form, and then consider a state of local emergency if needed. And so just very clear, we have 3 stages. We expect people to be listening, to be paying attention, to follow the bylaw. And if not, and stage 3, and we're seeing a negative forecast, high occupancy, little response from the community, then we think about an emergency. But it's not part of the bylaw. It's we look to our emergency powers for this. In terms of stage trigger criteria, this is an operational decision. This is how we decide when to move into stage 1, 2, or 3, or go backwards. Staff currently do this on a daily basis in the summertime. We look at our water usage, we look at our weather forecast, We work with Tourism Tofino to help us with our occupancy forecasts, and apparently we're going to be getting better data from them this summer, which is great. We look at our dam levels, our creek flows, and another trigger would be if we had an emergency. We need to be able to move to the stage 3 or greater quickly. So in terms of engagement, there's today's committee of the whole. We expect to have a number of roundtables in the coming weeks. Tofino page. And then again, stage 1 is a engagement, a big part of our engagement process. We're going to be saying, okay, we're coming to the summer season. We're looking like we have a dry 2 weeks coming ahead. We're into stage 1. And stage 1 doesn't have any prohibitions, but please start thinking about conserving. And so just get into the recommendations and any questions. So maybe I'll just take any questions from council.
Master?
This hand watering by hand for gardens and that. I know a lot of communities clarify that by basically saying it's a hose pipe and you can use a watering can.
Okay.
So I think if that's our intention, that people use watering cans. I think we should clarify that we do mean a ban on hose pipes.
Thomas?
I was gonna share basically along the same as Councillor McMaster to clarify about usage proposes. I know we're not targeting residents, but I live in a multi-residential building, and last year during stage 2, because they determined hygienic purposes, they thought that it applied to washing cars as well. So maybe having some clarity around that.
No car washes.
Through the chair. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate this one. I'm glad you brought up the non-revenue water, and you clearly articulated that. I didn't know if to bring it up in the last part or bring it up in this one. So, but thank you for recognizing that at 18.5%, that is significant. I was curious as to where you were looking for that reduction, and you've articulated those areas. So thank you for that, recognizing how important almost 20% is literally accounted for in many ways, and recognizing that we have made strides already in that leak detection area, et cetera. I did have, and one of the interesting things around conservation that was in the water master plan, and I have it here in the notes, was there were some issues around quantifying the reduction of consumption by conservation is difficult and would require further investigation, and that was in the WM in the report. But your data clearly indicates, that we can see with that graph that those conservation measures do have statistical, and we have the data to support that. So I was just, did you have any insight into why that comment was made in the report?
Yeah, so the WMP was done, it was completed first, and it was under a different writer who's the overall project manager for that project. The water conservation plan started a bit later, and almost after the WMP was completed, and that graph, for example, I only got that a week ago.
Okay.
And so it's just a little bit of, at the time of writing, we didn't have that, but we've gone back and forth with Maclean to make sure that we could provide something like that. So, okay, thanks.
Mayor Law, and then Councillor Anderson after.
Just another excellent report, I gotta say. Really happy to get this. And silver lining out of this, just wanted to go back to the graph. You don't have to, I'll just comment on it, about how successful the residents have been at conserving water. Just can't overstate how how proud I am of our community. When they were asked to conserve water, they went over and above and conserved water. So that's it's great to see in a graph. Thanks.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, along with prohibitions on water use, if we can provide some tips for water conservation about encouraging use of gray water, storing rainwater. There's, I think everyone knows about low flow toilets, but there's also low flow faucet attachments. There's actually intermittent shower controls as well that people might be interested to know about, so that you're not standing in a flow of shower water for the whole shower. It can turn on and off. Anyways, there's those kinds of things. I'd like to see sort of a positive encouragement aspect to conservation with maybe just some facts or a page that people could go to get some ideas if they don't have a great idea. The other part I would comment on is the whole communication of it. I think those that live here and the various commercial sectors and industrial users are very responsive to our conservation efforts. But I think that there may be a part of the visiting population that just doesn't know, and even though they see the signs, they don't know what that means. So any ways that we can find to reach out, because we usually have the conservation measures while people are visiting. So if we can, I don't know, harness any communication efforts through management operators or Tofino tourism or anything like that. Tofino tourism has been helpful in the past, so I don't know if that needs to be made part of the plan or not, but that's an aspect that, along with what all the stages do, and I think there's sort of a communication aspect that could be beefed up.
I think it's a great point. We have addressed that with one of the edits that are coming will be an appendices with a communications plan that the manager of corporate services and I have been discussing, which is basically taking what we did last year, which was a very good communications plan with lots of different ideas and approaches, and formalizing that in this document as an appendix. So to your point, it's a great suggestion.
Great. And through the chair, just, yeah, and one more, and I forgot to ask, the focus being, clearly the residents had responded, and there's going to be a more focus on the ICI component there. And one of the in that beautiful pie graphs is our fish plant, and specifically Cermak as a major user, specifically in those production times in August. And is there, in terms of those conversations, and I'm just wondering, and I don't want to sound punitive, but when we are in those situations, do we have authority to basically stop production? I'm speaking specifically of the fish plant in this case, but do we have that form of authority?
It's a question I'm probably not educated enough, prepared enough tonight to answer. Obviously, that would be last ditch stuff that would be taken off. And there are concerns. I know there are concerns through Island Health and through Charter Rights and Freedoms. You can't just turn people's water off. And so even if you did, you'd be facing, obviously legal concerns. What you could do, though, more likely that you ended up after the new stage 3 and into a state of a local emergency, that's a different question, which is why one of the reasons we're suggesting a stage that's like an emergency stage, because then everything's off the table and we'll do what we have to do to secure water for our residents. But I would want to do that under the policy umbrella of emergency versus, as a stage. And to Cermak's, to speak for Cermak, they don't produce in August anymore. They just take care of July, and traditionally our driest part of the season and our busiest part of the season has been August. So that was a win, that we got to that point with Cermak, and they're probably our poster child for best conservers, what they've managed to, how they managed to make their system more efficient. So yeah, just wanted to comment.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask one question. I thought in the past there was mention of a non-potable water storage, and could that be made available during times of extended periods so people could maybe access it to maintain their vehicles and wash water gardens?
Yeah, it's a great point. And it was originally a project sheet for 2024. It was we were going to use the old Lufkin Reservoir in Rosewood Bay as a potential non-potable water storage. I had our infrastructure and asset management team look into it, and it just doesn't make any sense for us. It'd be cheaper to purchase a bunch of portable storage basically than to try to deal with that. A big part of the issue, apart from the age of that facility and the fact how we'd have to make it safe, make the rest of our water system safe from it, is that we don't have any access to it that people could get to. So now is a strata subdivision. And it would kind of have an orphaned old reservoir there that we can't use. We have rights to get to it, but we don't necessarily have rights to bring people onto the property. So then, putting a pipe to get it just looked, in the end, we thought it was a great idea. We dug into the details, it just didn't make any more sense. So
Okay, thank you.
Just as a side note, before the strata was there, people would actually live on the top of the reservoir for their summer accommodation. People that actually lived up there.
I don't have any more questions, but I just wanted to give you feedback that I really like the new proposed stages. I think it'll be much easier for people to understand that they're tied into actual trigger points. Not that the other ones weren't, but these ones seem very clearly defined, or proposed to be very clearly defined. And I thought that we did a really great job with communications last year. And I think we'll do that again this year. And I feel that we were very supported by the province in our messaging as well, which is something that's kind of heartening, is that going into this, we're not isolated as a community. It's unfortunate that it's all British Columbia, but it is messaging that I think everybody is getting and is going to be more familiar with as we go forward.
Okay, so I think I'll read this motion now. I move from the chair that the District of Tofino 2024 Water Conservation Plan attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Water Conservation Plan that dated February 26, 2024 be received for information, and that staff be authorized to prepare amendments to District of Tofino Water Use and Conservation Bylaw number 1224, 2016, based on the Water Conservation Plan. Seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favor? Motion is carried. And then I will move on to the question.
To chair, we do have some attendees online, so I will make the call now for anyone to ask a question of council. You can raise your hand using the raise hand function and state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. So calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no questions at this point.
Okay, then I will move from the chair that the meeting, we move into closed section, and that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 90A, personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employer, or agent. C, employee relations. I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. L, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98. And L, of the community charter to discuss matters, I read it wrong. Okay, all in favor? And close.